Frederick II attempted to regain the initiative with a swift strike of Prussian cavalry, considered the best in Europe at the time. However, the attack failed due to the hilly terrain with bushes, and the Prussian hussars were mowed down by dense gunfire from rifles and cannon.
Oh my gosh! So much for being the best in Europe.
The
7 Years War
7 Years War
reaction. I have been doing a lot of Islamic history reactions and all that fun stuff, and I've kind of been neglecting the Eurocentric stuff. I gotta change that, bro. So yeah, 7 Years War reaction.
War was one of the most extensive and bloodiest conflicts of the 18th century. This epic confrontation among European powers spanned across Eurasia, North America, and South America, as well as the waters of 3 oceans. The scale of the conflict led some historians to refer to it as the First Global War.
It was. I mean, I call this 7 Years War World War Zero because of this. It really kind of blows my mind how, now that I think about it, where did the term World War, where was that even coined? Like, who decided to call World War One World War One, right? And World War Two World War Two. It's like there's a few conflicts before that by definition would be a world war, like the 7 Years War. I technically, in my opinion, I would call the 7 Years War World War One, kind of. Well, I don't know. It didn't really happen in Africa or Asia, except for the Indian subcontinent or in South America. So I guess it would be better to say World War Zero. Yeah.
The 7 Years' War began due to the ambitious territorial aspirations of European monarchs and their desire to redraw the results of the War of the Austrian Succession. The main
I gotta react to this war of Austrian Succession, because I hear about it a lot and how it influenced future conflicts, but I don't know too much behind it. So eventually I'm going to react to that War of Austrian Succession.
adversaries were the Austrian Habsburgs and the Prussian Hohenzollerns. Austrian ruler Maria Theresa sought to regain her lost territory of Silesia. The bellicose Frederick II aimed to weaken the Habsburg influence in the Holy Roman Empire and seize the silver-rich Saxony and Bohemia. Simultaneously, tensions persisted in the rivalry between France and Great Britain, competing for colonies in America, Africa, and Asia, as well as spheres of influence in Europe. British-French armed clashes in North America began as early as 1754, and
Come on. Why? How could you forget to include the Lesser Antilles? Come on, how could you forget to include the Lesser Antilles Caribbean? And this is the thing, right? In this time period, the Caribbean was still an important theater. At this point, this is the first British Empire. This is this is the beginning. This is where the second British Empire was actually starting to take root. The second British Empire was I explained this to somebody because most people don't already know this. There were two British empires, or classifications. The first British Empire was basically the New World, primarily Caribbean. Second British Empire was India, right? And basically, they gave it two classifications because India will be the most important part of the British Empire. Well, second British Empire, but the first British Empire before Britain got India, it would have been the Caribbean, and that would have been the most important part at that point. So that's why they usually give it like two classifications. But I mean, still though, this is like pre-revolutionary war. So the Caribbean didn't completely lose its relevance yet. So you should have at least put the whole freaking Caribbean in it. I notice a lot of people do that. I mean, I don't really care. It doesn't really bother me. But that's usually why whenever some people just don't know where my country is, I'm just like, man, it's really not their fault, because there's a lot of inaccurate maps that just completely leave out like half of the entire Caribbean. And it's like, bruh. Although it's like some people know, well, quite a lot of people know. A lot of people know, but there's much that kind of doesn't know. Like, it's kind of like, I want to say 50-50. I would say more like 75-25, right? Like a good 75% of people, I tell them where I'm from, and they're like, oh, okay. But then there's like 25%, which is still a good chunk, that's like, they don't know where that is. But anyways, I'm just saying, you got to keep the map accurate, because this is a historical video, and any person who likes history should know that you need to keep things accurate as much as possible. Otherwise, that's an intellectual insult.
Served as a prelude to the 7 Years' War. Before this confrontation, there was a diplomatic revolution, during which the old coalition of Great Britain, the Habsburgs, the Russian Empire, and the Netherlands fell apart. The first three monarchies could not agree on the financing of continental armies and the defense of Hanover and the Austrian Netherlands against potential invasion by the powerful French army.
If a man really hated...
Moreover, the Habsburgs were offended by Britain, which swiftly agreed to territorial losses for its Austrian allies during the Second Treaty of Aix-la-Chapelle. The Dutch Republic was too weakened after recent wars and was unwilling to deploy its army to defend the Habsburg Netherlands. During this time, Austria was led by Chancellor Wenzel Anton von Kaunitz, who advocated for closer ties with France and maintaining the alliance with Russia. During this time, British King George II, who also ruled the Principality of Hanover, sought to secure his Hanoverian lands from potential French invasion. He saw a strengthened Prussia as a reliable guarantee of security for his German possessions. Meanwhile, the Russian Empire viewed the Kingdom of Prussia as its primary adversary in northeastern Europe. Russian authorities made plans to seize East Prussia, which they intended to exchange for the territories of Courland and Semigalia. The dissolution of the old alliance between France and Prussia was facilitated by Frederick II's dismissive attitude towards Louis XV's favorite and mistress, Marquise de Pompadour. Ultimately, Britain initiated secret negotiations for an alliance with its recent opponent, Prussia, which culminated in the signing of the Westminster Agreement in January 1756. According to these agreements, Britain provided Frederick II with substantial annual financial assistance amounting to £670,000 in exchange for his commitment to defend Hanover against French aggression. In response, France moved closer to Austria, which resulted in the signing of the Treaty of Versailles in May of the same year. Attempts by British diplomats to sway Russia to their side failed. Thus, Britain and Prussia found themselves in a highly disadvantageous position, as their potential adversaries enjoyed a threefold numerical advantage in troops on the continent. The Prussian army numbered around 200,000, with military contingents in Hanover totaling up to 50,000.
Ooh, that's actually quite sizable. Damn, wow. That's literally like 250,000. That's actually really sizable.
Instead, the forces of France and the Habsburgs together outnumbered the Prussians, while the Russian Empire, with its 330,000-strong army, significantly surpassed all future participants in the conflict.
I mean, Russia has always had a big army. I mean, it's because Russia's huge. Obviously, it needs a big army because Russia's huge. But like, if you take like size of a country I don't know how to properly distinguish this. I guess size to army size ratio, like size of a country to army size ratio, if that makes sense. I don't know. That does not make sense. Basically, 200,000 for freaking Prussia size is absolutely like freaking huge. 220,000 for Austria, meh, not really. I mean, yeah, that's. I mean that's. They should have an army that size. Yeah, same thing with France, 260,000. I mean, if you look at the size of France, plus their colonies too, it's like meh. Hanover 50,000. That's actually quite big for a place as small as Hanover. Really and truly, Russia should be having more troops than 330,000, because at this point, Russia was absolutely huge.
However, the combat effectiveness of the Russian army was considered low.
It has always been considered low. Oh my goodness, dude! I swear, the Russian army is just. That's like a curse that the Russian army has had so much. Although that not all the time, okay, not all the time. There were plenty of times where the Russian army showed up. Okay, I'm not saying not. I.e., against the Ottomans. What was that guy's name? That guy. During Napoleonic Wars in Italy. Right, he was a genius, man. What was his name? Suvorov. Yeah, Suvorov. Yeah, that guy. Yeah, that was. Yeah. Yeah, there were plenty of other times too, where the Russian army showed up. Like the Great Northern War as well. Again, so I'm not saying the Russian army is completely like bad, but they have had a lot of times where like they were underwhelming, and that has just been a curse, typically because of leadership problems. But it's like, wow, Russia. Like, wow.
Contrast, Prussia was extremely militarized. Compared to France, the ratio of soldiers to population in Prussia was 4.5 times higher. Frederick II.
Yeah, if you take the population of soldiers to, civilian, yeah, that was absolutely huge.
Relied heavily on his well-trained army when he decided to confront his opponents individually. On August 28, 1756, Prussian forces invaded the formerly neutral territory of Saxony, whose ruler maintained friendly relations with Russia and the Habsburgs. The Prussian king aimed to transform Saxony into a convenient base for continuing the war against the Habsburgs. On October 1st, the Austrian army of 33,000 under Field Marshal Browne, rushing to aid the Saxons, was halted by Frederick II's 29,000-strong forces in the Battle of Lobositz. 3 weeks later, the Prussian king forced the outnumbered Saxon army to surrender, and their soldiers were forcibly conscripted into the Prussian military. In 1756, in the North American theater of the war, Britain and France both sought to enlist the support of local Native American tribes. France was somewhat more successful in this endeavor because French settlers generally had more peaceful coexistence with the indigenous populations compared to British colonists.
That's so odd. It's so odd to me how initially, when France began its colonialism, France was like at the start, France was not bad. Like France was kind of just like, just tame. Like what changed, France? Seriously, what changed? But then, France went from that to being freaking one of like debatably one of the worst colonial overlords to have. Like, Oh, seriously, like what happened? Oh my goodness, because British America, I don't even know. Like, I mean, yes, they were British and English at this time, but like, should I even call them? Should I call them Americans, or should I call them British? Because really and truly, these people here in the British Empire, in British America, which obviously would become the United States of America, American colonialism was awful, and people tend to overlook that. Like, so it's like, honestly, the people, because King George, after he seized these lands from the French after the 7 Years' War, he didn't want the settlers to encroach on native lands and cause issues with them too much. Although in American school, they'll portray as, oh, he wanted more control over the colonists. No, that's BS. No, he had good reasons to pass the laws that he did, barring settlers from encroaching on native lands after the 7 Years' War. But the settlers in British America, some of them, they wanted to just keep expanding, but King George, he barred that. So it's like I don't want to say that, oh, the entire British Empire is bad, right? Like, at first, the entire British Empire, it seemed like the British Empire would be like really bad overlords because of the way how they treated the natives. But when you actually dig deeper, you realize it wasn't really the British whole. It wasn't them as a whole. It was just the Americans that used to be British, right? That had that. That's just how the Americans treated the natives. And even after America got independence, I mean, we see this when the natives preferred, actually, during the War of 1812, where the natives preferred the British over the Americans and sided with the British over the Americans in the War of 1812. So yeah, it's yeah. That I think it will be safe to say that this was just a uniquely American thing. I want to say the British, like, that this is just completely British, if that makes sense. But yeah, I'm just saying, like, the French, dude, like, come on, France, like, you had it. You could have been so respected so much more, and now France decided, nah, I'm gonna be evil. I'm gonna be evil. Like, no, seriously though. But if anyone does know, like, why France kind of just did a complete 180 and just decided, yeah, we're not gonna be tame anymore, and decided to be one of the worst colonial overlords to have, an explanation of that would be quite nice, quite frankly speaking.
During the 7 Years' War, the French received support from the Shawnee, the majority of the Hurons and Algonquins. On the other hand, the British were allied with the Iroquois, some smaller tribes, and a few scattered Mohican tribes. However, Britain had a significant demographic advantage, with a population of over 1 million across its 13 colonies, compared to the French colonies, whose population was 7 times smaller. Consequently, Britain was able to muster more powerful colonial militia forces. In 1756, the French achieved significant success in the North American region by capturing Fort Oswego in August. This strategic move resulted in the British losing the northeastern lands of the New York colony and access to Lake Ontario. Simultaneously, in India, where intense competition for ports and colonies was underway, the unexpected ally of the French was the ruler of Bengal, Siraj-ud-Dawla. The Bengali Nawab besieged and captured the important British trading and military center of Calcutta.
Yeah, I reacted to that.
1757, Frederick II.
So let's talk about India real quick, right? So in my Historia Civilis video, I pointed out how the Caribbean was like the stepping stone for the British Empire, right? I said that without the Caribbean, the British Empire wouldn't really like been able to get as big as it did, get as influential as it did, right? Because really and truly, if anybody knows the history, especially of that region, you should know exactly what I'm talking about, right? Sugar, simple sugar. At this point in time, sugar was called white gold. Some of you should know that. Much like how oil is called black gold today. And Britain was making bank off of it from the British West Indies. More so specifically, my country, which was still a colony at this time, Barbados, and eventually Jamaica. And this is why, and I still stand by this, but this is literally why I said that, because before India, right? Before India, there was the Caribbean, right? Come on. This is why I said, like, without the Caribbean, like, Britain would not be as influential as it was. And I had somebody, right? I had somebody who commented, and they were like, that's not true. What I said was not true. Because Britain was trading with India at this time, and India was the main wealth generator of the British Empire. Well, duh. Everybody knows that. But people overlook that before India was fully colonized, and even then, before the East India Company, the British East India Company fully colonized India, and the crown eventually would then go take it, there was the Caribbean. Guys, the amount of money that was being generated from the sugar, guys, my home city, Bridgetown, Barbados, to give you an idea of how much money it was really generating. It was the third richest colony by wealth generator at its peak in the entire New World, only behind Haiti, which is also another sugar generator, but for the French, and I think Boston. Okay, it was making more money than every single other colony in the New World besides those two places, right? At its peak, right? And the British knew how important Barbados was. And I said this before, that they literally built so many fortresses. And the island is like 21 miles long, right? It's 21 miles long, the size of Manhattan, roughly. And they built 45 fortresses on the island. Because the island was making that much money for it. Okay? You don't build that much fortresses on one small island if it was not making that much money. Okay? They even teach us in Barbados that at HP, Barbados was considered a jewel in the early British Empire because Barbados was making that much money for it. Right? And this is why I will always stand by my word. And you could go look this up yourself. You could go dive into this yourself. This is why I say, without the Caribbean, Britain just would not have had the money to eventually just go and expand into other places. I mean, that objectively speaking, yeah. This is why I say Barbados, my country, was the stepping stone of the British Empire. But some people, most people really, because I know there's some people who know like the Caribbean, how important it was. There are people like that. But people tend to gloss over it because they think, oh, small islands, oh, well, they don't seem important. But people who actually know their stuff would know exactly what I'm talking about. I'm just bringing this up because that one comment that was like, bro, India, bro. Like, dude, it took a long time before Britain colonized all of India, and at this point in time, and this is why Britain is classified in two empires. The first British Empire, the primary focus was the Caribbean. The second British Empire, the primary focus was India. This is why Britain is classified as two empires. Again, you could go look this up. Nothing that I said was wrong there. Okay, or I'll see these people who will say, "Oh, like the Caribbean wasn't really like generating that much money, like overall." Like, yeah, overall. When Britain had already colonized everywhere else, had already started setting up the industry. Yeah. You think Britain would have been able to industrialize if they weren't making all that sugar money in the first place? Before India was colonized? It's basic common sense. Where would Britain get its money to do all of its stuff if it did not colonize the Caribbean? Where? Because India wasn't fully colonized. They just had a few trade ports. Right? Hell, how would Britain expand deeper into India if it wasn't generating all that money in the first place from the Caribbean? Basic common sense. Basic common sense. I could talk about this more and more, but I just like that one comment on my Historia Civilis video. Like it stuck out to me. I was like, I'm gonna respond to this comment in a video, and now is the time, because a lot of people just don't understand that. Okay, but all right. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's continue.
Second renewed active military operations by leading a 70,000-strong Prussian army into Bohemia. Initially, fortune favored him, as Prussian forces won victories against the Austrians at the battles of Reichenberg and near Prague. However, reinforcements arrived swiftly for the Habsburg forces in Bohemia under the command of Leopold von Daun. They decisively defeated Frederick II's 34,000-strong army in the bloody Battle of Kolin on June 18th. The Prussian army suffered significant losses, including half of its troops and most of its artillery. Following this defeat, the aura of invincibility surrounding the Prussian king was shattered, and he hastily retreated to Saxony. Meanwhile, through the mediation of
Prussia. Low-key, I always felt that Prussia was overrated. Honestly speaking, overrated does not mean bad, but I always kind of just felt that Prussia was overrated. And it's like in this time period, I really and truly felt Prussia was very, very overrated.
Of French diplomats, Sweden joined the anti-Prussian coalition. Sweden sought to reclaim the part of Pomerania seized by Prussia. The combined Russian and Swedish fleets were able to block attempts by British ships to enter the Baltic Sea.
Well,
during Frederick,
Britain does not rule the waves.
France and Russia directed their forces towards capturing Hanover and Eastern Prussia, respectively. The French army under Marshal Louis d'Estrées took advantage of their numerical superiority, and by the summer of 1757 seized most of the territories of Hanover and Brunswick. The Russian forces, commanded by Stepan Apraksin, enjoyed an even more significant threefold advantage. They captured substantial portions of eastern Prussia, including Memel, and defeated the Prussian army at the Battle of Gross-Jägersdorf. However, logistical issues...
This is the same Russian army that people were saying weren't seen as capable. Combat quality wasn't really good. The thing about the Russian army is that when the Russian army is led by good leaders, it is just a monster, like a force to be reckoned with. But the bad leadership, bad corruption problems, and this still plagues it to this day, yeah, hampers it a lot.
And strategic miscalculations led to the Russian Empire withdrawing from the conquered lands due to supply shortages. In August, a second French army led by Charles de Soubise advanced into Thuringia, from where they could strike at the heart of Prussia. Concurrently, with pressure from allies, Habsburg forces launched an offensive into Silesia, capturing the important city of Breslau. The shortage of troops to contend with three numerically superior adversaries was so acute that on some fronts there were no units available for defense.
Wow.
Therefore, in October 1757, a small Austrian flying corps led by General Hadik managed to slip into the heart of Prussia and unexpectedly capture Berlin for one day. Frederick understood that only luck, maneuverability, and catastrophic mistakes by his opponents could save him from complete disaster. On November 7th, leading a 22,000-strong army, he executed a swift maneuver and delivered a flanking blow that routed the combined French-Austrian forces of 43,000 at Rossbach.
Oh,
The
wow.
Allied forces were marching, with commanders neglecting proper reconnaissance, allowing Frederick to execute a brilliant attack. After repelling the French threat, Frederick swiftly regrouped his elite troops in Silesia, where he achieved one of his most brilliant victories. On December 5th, commanding a 33,000-strong army, he engaged 80,000 troops under Charles of Lorraine near the village of Leuthen. In this battle, Frederick employed his favored tactical deception, the oblique order. Initially feigning an attack on the right northern flank of the Austrians, the majority of the Prussian forces actually shifted south to encircle the left southern flank of the enemy. Creating a semi-envelopment of this part of the enemy, the Prussian army crushed the Austrians with intense firepower and bayonet charges. Attempts to send reinforcements and organize a counterattack failed due to panic and the excellent work of the Prussian artillery, strategically positioned.
Wow. Okay. Wow, Frederick. You know, I always used to think Frederick was a bit overrated, but I gotta react to continue my Frederick the Great series, to be honest. But that was, wow, stunning. That's actually, damn.
On heights. The Habsburg army suffered a sensational defeat, and heavy losses forced Charles of Lorraine to retreat from Silesia. In 1757, the struggle for colonies between Great Britain and France saw varying degrees of success. Britain formed 2 new regiments of colonial militia in North America and directed an additional 7 new regiments there. However, due to the British command's passivity, French actions proved to be successful once again. During the summer of that year, French forces of 8,000, along with Native Americans under Marquis de Montcalm, captured Fort William Henry. Britain lost another strategic position, and approximately 2,000 of its soldiers became prisoners. In India, the forces of the British East India Company, consisting of local sepoy soldiers and a few colonial troops, advanced against French territories. Initially, the British captured the French settlement of Chandigarh. Then, in June 1757, a 4,000-strong army led by Robert Clive defeated a nearly 50,000-strong army of the Bengali Nawab at the Battle of Plassey.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I remember this. I remember that. Yeah, it was already 50,000. He had traitors. Yeah, I reacted to this battle. Go check it out after this video. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, he had, yeah, okay. Yeah, it just hit my memory. Yes, I do remember this battle, yes.
However, the actual engagement involved no more than 7,000 to 8,000 soldiers of the Bengali army, as a significant portion of their forces remained inactive due to the bribery of British commanders.
Yeah.
At the beginning of 1758, there were changes in leadership in many armies. The French armies were commanded by Count Clermont, the Russian armies by Wilhelm Fermor, and the Austrian armies by Leopold von Daun. Prince Ferdinand of Brunswick took command of the Anglo-Hanoverian forces, which also included troops from Brunswick and Hesse. Ferdinand's successful actions initially recaptured Bremen and pushed the French back beyond the Rhine by April. Russian forces occupied a large part of East Prussia and seized the well-fortified city of Königsberg between January and March. Meanwhile, Frederick II of Prussia planned an advance into Bohemia and Moravia, managing to lay siege to Olomouc in May. However, all his plans were disrupted when Russian armies moved towards Brandenburg in the summer. To defend his capital, Frederick withdrew with part of his forces to the north, leaving other units in Silesia and Saxony to defend.
Yeah, I was looking at this like, bro, you have a Russian problem there, bro. Like, I don't think you should be advancing on Austria right now.
And against the forces of the Habsburgs. At the end of June 1758, Prussian and Allied forces, led by Ferdinand of Brunswick, achieved victory over a 45,000-strong French army in the Battle of Krefeld.
Oh my gosh, France is just completely getting handed. I don't want to say, I don't want to curse, but I mean, France, come on, you're supposed to be the juggernaut of Europe, and you're freaking, how are you like getting so many losses, France? My goodness, France, come on. I really expected better from France.
This success was attributed to skillful flanking maneuvers, temporarily reducing the threat of French invasion into Hanover. On August 14th, in the region of Brandenburg, Frederick II's 33,000-strong army engaged in a fierce battle with a 42,000-strong Russian force at Zorndorf. This battle turned out to be one of the bloodiest of the 7 Years' War. Prussia suffered approximately 11,000 casualties, including killed and severely wounded, while the Russians lost around 16,000 men. Despite the heavy losses on both sides, neither gained a clear advantage during the battle.
What?
Ultimately, the Russian army under the command of William Fermor organized a retreat to regroup with auxiliary forces. Frederick the Great, despite the Russian claims of victory, viewed the outcome as advantageous due to the significant Russian casualties and their retreat.
Pyrrhic victory. Yeah, Pyrrhic victory. Well, I mean, it did force the Russians to pull back. Frederick was defending, so you can say that this was a defensive victory. Yeah, because Russia couldn't keep advancing, so.
Later, Frederick II, with his army totaling 60,000 soldiers, again moved towards Bohemia by 2 routes. However, near the village of Hochkirch in southern Saxony, he encountered Ludwig von Daun's force of 77,000 troops. Despite having only 33,000 soldiers at his disposal, the Prussian king decided to engage in battle. However, his old tactical tricks proved ineffective against such a large and well-prepared enemy army.
Hold on, before you pay for yet.
Consequently, on October 14th, Frederick II suffered a painful defeat, losing nearly 10,000 soldiers killed or wounded. Yet, von Daun did not immediately advance on Berlin. Instead, he settled for a failed siege of Dresden. This allowed Prussia to regroup its forces and eventually drive the Austrians out of Silesia. After 3 years of war, Prussia continued to struggle against its 3 numerically and financially superior enemies. However,
Prussia's still standing, which is impressive.
Russia's already critically low mobilization reserves had been exhausted, and a significant portion of its best soldiers had perished in battles or succumbed to diseases. Additionally, the country's economy could not sustain the increasing costs of war, and Frederick II avoided bankruptcy solely due to financial aid from Britain. To compensate,
all right. And where are you saying Britain was getting that money from? And where do you think Britain was getting that money from? I mean, where? Where? Tell me. Money don't grow on trees. Oh my gosh, money don't grow on trees, man. Oh my goodness gracious me, dude. Oh, like come on, it goes back to what I was saying earlier in the video. Like, imagine if Britain didn't have the British West Indies at this point. Sure, they were still making bank as well, trading with India. But guys, making bank from trading and generating wealth, it's two different things. The British Caribbean was generating a lot of wealth. Okay, Britain wasn't trading. No, it was growing cash crop sugar, and that was able to be sold because sugar was high demand at this point in time. So no, that's generating. Yes, Britain was trading with India before it got colonized by the East India Company. And even then, it's like the East India Company wasn't even directly controlled by the crown yet. It was a freaking company. So really and truly, the company was making profits for the company, not the actual country. Surely, yes, there probably would have been taxes and whatnot, but still, it's like the profits are going to the company, bro. All right, that's like saying, like Apple, because Apple's the big company. That's like, thinking that Apple, the profits of Apple, is going to the US because Apple makes up a good chunk of the American GDP, right? When in reality, it's going to the company. It's not going to the actual country. Yeah, that's the difference. The wealth that was being generated in the British Caribbean, don't get me wrong, there were private owners and whatnot, but no, that was actually going back to the actual United Kingdom, the actual country. So the coffers, basically, the king's coffers, right? So again, just pointing that out. Let's continue.
For these losses, the Prussian king implemented new forced mobilizations, including among the lands he had conquered and among prisoners from enemy armies.
That's bad. Bad idea, because here's the thing about war, right? You should never really like mobilize from people you capture or prisoners, because defection rates are going to be high. They're most likely going to switch sides. You really actually should never like mobilize people who don't want to fight. Like, like, because they might just switch sides more. A good example of this would be like Russia today and the conflict that it has. Mobilizing, like when Russia expanded the whole issue in Ukraine, it's like so many Russians fled. And, at first it was like, oh no, all that manpower is leaving. But then it's like, no, wait, that's a good thing. Because the people who don't actually want to fight are gone. So you don't really have to worry about defection rates and all that issue that you would get from people who don't want to fight, because they're gone. I'm just using that as an example to better explain what I mean. But yeah, that is not, Frederick, no, Frederick, that's not, your army is not going to be as capable doing that. Although he is desperate, though. I know he's desperate. So
the combat readiness and morale of these conscripted forces were extremely low. and they often
Yep.
deserted or switched sides
Yep.
to the enemy given favorable opportunities.
Yeah, that is exactly. It's exactly like what I just said.
During the 7 Years' War, most armies employed scorched earth tactics. Civilian populations suffered from widespread looting, violence, and requisitions. During the spring and June of 1759, both sides exchanged blows targeting depots and bases in Silesia, Western Poland, and Saxony.
Yeah, what is Poland doing in all of this? How did somebody answer that for me? How did Poland just let Russia just walk through its lands? And Prussia too. How, like, I always like wonder, like, why was Poland just so like static and just not doing anything in this whole conflict? Like,
In the course of these maneuvers, the Russian army joined forces with the Austrians and moved towards Berlin. Frederick II, leading a 49,000-strong army, attempted to halt the 60,000-strong enemy forces near Kunersdorf. On August 12th, the armies clashed in a fierce battle. Initially, the Prussian forces displaced the Russians from several crucial heights and decisively won the artillery duel. However, fresh reserves from the Austrian and Russian armies later pushed back the weary Prussian army and inflicted severe losses. Frederick II attempted to regain the initiative with a swift strike of Prussian cavalry, considered the best in Europe at the time. However, the attack failed due to the hilly terrain with bushes, and the Prussian hussars were mowed down by dense gunfire from rifles and cannon.
oh my gosh! So much for being the best in Europe.
The Allies then launched a decisive counterattack, forcing Frederick with the remnants of his forces to escape. Prussia lost 18,000 soldiers and nearly all of its artillery, while the Allied, Austrian, and Russian armies lost about 15,000 warriors. Frederick had no reserves left to defend the Prussian capital, so the Allied army could easily have captured Berlin. The Prussian king was in despair and prepared to commit suicide. However, disputes among the Allies prevented them from agreeing on plans for further offensive. This stroke of luck was dubbed the first miracle of the Hohenzollerns of Brandenburg.
Bro.
On August 1st, a coalition army consisting of 40,000 Prussian, British, and Allied forces successfully defeated a 60,000-strong French army in the Battle of Minden.
France just can't stop taking L's. France just cannot stop taking losses, man. Oh my goodness. I'm not even worried about the freaking French front anymore. France is just...
This victory marked another failure for France in its attempt to capture Hanover.
Oh my gosh, France. Why are you so trash? Jeez.
However, on other fronts, Prussia faced much tougher challenges. A notable example was the Battle of Maxen, where, during the battle, 6,000 Prussian infantrymen switched sides and joined the Austrians,
Wow.
while another 12,000
Oh my gosh.
surrendered as prisoners of war.
Wow.
These defectors included former prisoners of war from Prussia's enemy armies. Despite this setback, Frederick II continued to enforce harsh mobilization measures on his citizens, inhabitants of the territories he had conquered, and prisoners of war. At the same time, the situation in other theaters of war differed. In 1759, the balance of power in the struggle for colonies tilted in favor of London. With the help of a 44,000-strong army of regular troops and colonial regiments, Britain managed to break French resistance in North America. The French forces were outnumbered threefold, which inevitably led to the British capture of Quebec City and the forts of Niagara and Ticonderoga.
Oh yeah.
Meanwhile, in India, the French army suffered a setback in their attempt to besiege British-held Madras, undermining all further plans of the French command. In the first half of 1760, the Prussian armies maneuvered desperately through the territories of Saxony, Silesia, and western Poland, trying to avoid encounters with numerically superior allies while seizing opportunities to crush isolated parts of the Habsburg and Russian forces. A somewhat curious situation unfolded on August 15th of that year near Liegnitz. A portion of the Austrian 100,000-strong army pursued Frederick the Great's 27,000-strong force. However, the Prussian king thoroughly routed a 30,000-strong corps that had engaged in pursuit. Other parts of the Austrian army did not arrive in time to assist and subsequently refrained from risking engagement with the Prussian forces. For his outstanding victories in this war against more numerous opponents, Frederick earned his epithet, the Great. In October 1760, the Russian-Austrian army under Todleben managed to capture the lightly defended Berlin for a few days. However, news of approaching reinforcements prompted the Allied forces to quickly withdraw. On November 12th, after numerous maneuvers and local battles, Frederick the Great, leading a 44,000-strong army, finally encountered von Daun's 53,000-strong Habsburg army near the town of Torgau. The Austrians occupied strategically advantageous heights, so the Prussian king decided to attack them from two wooded flanks on different sides. Thanks to these bold and unconventional flanking maneuvers from the south and north, the Prussian army achieved victory. However, this victory came at a high cost, as Prussian losses in killed, wounded, and captured amounted to about 17,000 soldiers. In 1760, Britain achieved decisive victories over the French in North America and India. In North America, they captured Montreal and finally subdued all of French Canada. In India, the British triumphed in the Battle of Wandiwash and successfully besieged the capital of French India, Pondicherry, in the fall. The capture of this city in January of the following year symbolized Britain's victory and France's defeat in the struggle for colonies. As of the beginning of 1761, the Prussian army, including garrisons of sick and wounded, numbered approximately 100,000.
You know what's crazy is if the French had won a 7 Years' War, damn, we would all be most likely speaking French today. I mean, France/French was in lingua franca, but like French would have been solidified as the lingua franca, bro. Mad.
Their opponents on the continent had a fourfold numerical advantage. Therefore, throughout the year, the weakened Prussian armies on the Eastern Front continued maneuvering and carefully avoiding direct engagements. They also focused on diversions against the bases and supply lines of their allies. Meanwhile, the Russians and Austrians captured several fortresses in Silesia and eastern Pomerania, including Schweidnitz and Kolberg. More active battles were fought in modern-day Western Germany. Ferdinand of Brunswick failed to capture Kassel, and French forces achieved victory at Grunberg. However, the French were unable to achieve complete success in this direction due to a thorough defeat at Fellinghausen. On July 15th and 16th, 1761,
France can't stop taking L's, as usual.
A strong French army to dislodge their opponents from dominant heights ended in complete failure against the skilled resistance of a 65,000-strong British, Prussian, and Hanoverian army.
This is actually embarrassing at this point for France, bro. Holy moly!
For all of Europe, Prussia's defeat seemed inevitable due to its limited resources. However, Frederick II was fortunate once again. In January 1762, the death of Empress Elizabeth of Russia led to her successor, Peter III, a fervent admirer of the Prussian king and a German by birth, forming an alliance with Prussia after initially declaring a ceasefire out of respect for Frederick's persona. This event was termed the Second Miracle of the House of Brandenburgs. All the Prussian territories conquered by Russia were returned to Prussia. Most of the Russian troops were supposed to return home, with 18,000 of them slated to fight against their recent allies if they did not agree to Frederick II's peace terms. However, the Russian forces behaved extremely passively, particularly by not engaging in the attack during the Battle of Burkersdorf in July 1762. In this battle, Frederick managed to push back the Austrian army of 75,000 under Leopold von Daun and buried the Habsburg hopes of reclaiming Silesia.
Shout out to the Russians for just not completely betraying the Austrians. Have my respect, even though I already respect Russia a lot. I mean, you have more respect, because that's just absurd. That's just absurd. Like, you were freaking allies, and now you're supposed to be fighting them. Like, nah. So, shout out to the Russians for that.
Earlier on June 24th, British, Prussian, and their allied forces defeated the Franco-Saxon army at the Battle of Wilhelmsthal. Thus, French attempts to advance into Prussia failed. During this period, a coup took place in the Russian Empire, bringing Catherine II to power, the wife of Peter III. She cancelled the alliance with Prussia, but also chose not to support her former allies. Therefore, the Russian Empire withdrew from the war.
Wow.
The British-Spanish
Bro, if Catherine the Great had re-entered the war, yeah, that would have been the end for Prussia. But she did meet Frederick the Great. I'm pretty sure she did meet Frederick the Great. I gotta continue reacting to that extra credit series. So yeah, that's probably why she didn't rejoin the war. Now that I think about it, that would make a lot of sense.
Confrontation flared up with renewed vigor. At the outset of the 7 Years' War, Spain sought to maintain neutrality.
Yeah, what the heck was Spain doing?
However, after Charles III ascended to the throne, the situation changed. He grew weary of constant attacks by English privateers on Spanish ships and feared Britain's excessive strengthening in all oceans. The new Spanish king moved closer to France and entered into a defensive-offensive alliance. On January 4th, 1762, Britain officially declared war on Spain. In response,
Britain
in the
want
spring
the
of
smoke.
1762, the Spanish army invaded Portugal,
Hey, parent.
a long-standing ally of England. The forces previously engaged in conquering French colonies in the Caribbean and India were utilized for attacks on Spanish ships and colonies. Initially, from April to August, British forces captured Cuba and Havana, and in October 1762,
Now that I did not know.
they took Manila. However, British attempts to establish control over all of the Philippines failed, as did efforts to capture Spanish colonies in South America. Gradually, most nations began to realize the futility of continuing the war and the exhaustion of their own resources. Initially, a preliminary ceasefire was signed between Prussia and France. The final major battle of the 7 Years' War was the Battle of Freiburg, which took place on October 29, 1762. Prussian forces, led by Prince Henry, younger brother of Frederick the Great, defeated 30,000 Austrian troops under General Haddock's command. However, naval and oceanic conflicts continued, with the most active confrontation between Spain and Britain. By the end of the war, losses from military actions outweighed gains from minor conquests, prompting hostile states to seek pathways to peace on terms acceptable to themselves. The 10th of February 1763 marked the signing of the Treaty of Paris, a pivotal peace agreement between Britain and Portugal on one side and France and Spain on the other. According to its terms, France ceded East Louisiana, Canada, some Caribbean islands, and most of its colonial possessions in India to Britain. Spain lost Florida to Britain but gained West Louisiana as compensation. Just 5 days later, the Treaty of Hubbardsburg was signed between Prussia and the Habsburg monarchy. This treaty recognized Prussia's possession of Silesia, solidifying its control under the Hohenzollern dynasty. Thus, the 7 Years' War ended with a victory for the British-Prussian coalition, leading to the strengthening and expansion of the British colonial empire. However, Britain's national debt doubled as a result of the war, prompting King George III to increase taxation in the American colonies. This policy eventually contributed to the American War of Independence and the formation of the United States.
Ooh, this video looks cool here. Italian Wars, causes and results of the largest conflict of the 16th century. Ooh, I'm currently reacting to that by Kings and Generals. Might watch this video. Anyways, if you made it all the way here, if you have any suggestions that you want me to do, comment it in the description below. Make sure you like the video. Go check out my other reactions on my channel. I have plenty at this point. So thank you for watching. Make sure you subscribe. And goodbye.